bank doors slammed shut with a finality that echoed through Helena Zimmerman's chest like a death knell, and she stood on the dusty boardwalk of Palisade, Colorado, clutching the foreclosure notice while the September sun of 1883 beat down mercilessly on her silk-clad shoulders. She had woken that morning still believing herself to be one of the wealthiest women in the Colorado Territory, the daughter of mining magnate Bernard Zimmerman, whose silver claims had made him a legend from Denver to San Francisco. By noon, she learned the truth that her father's attorney had hidden from her for 3 months since her father's death. The mines had played out 2 years ago. Her father had been borrowing against future yields that would never come, maintaining the illusion of wealth while the fortune crumbled like sandstone beneath his feet. The house, the horses, the furniture, the jewelry except for what she wore, all of it belonged to the bank now. And Richard, her fiancé of 8 months, had taken one look at the foreclosure notice, one long look at her face, and walked away without a backward glance. She had watched him climb into his carriage, the same carriage she had believed would one day carry her as his bride and drive toward the train station. He would be in Denver by nightfall, already forgetting her name. Helena stood frozen on the boardwalk, watching the people of Palisade hurry past her with averted eyes. News traveled fast in a town of fewer than 800 souls. By tomorrow, everyone would know that the Zimmerman fortune was a myth, that she was destitute, that her grand house on the hill now belonged to Harvey Sutton and his bank. She had nowhere to sleep tonight. She had no money for food. The realization crept over her slowly, like cold water rising. A horse nickered nearby, and Helena turned to see a tall man dismounting from a paint gelding outside the general store. He moved with the easy grace of someone who had spent more of his life in the saddle than out of it, his boots dusty, his hat weathered, his face tanned from years under the Colorado sun. He tied his horse and glanced her way, and their eyes met for just a moment before Helena looked away, heat rushing to her cheeks. She did not want pity. She did not want anyone to see her like this, dressed in expensive clothes that were now all she owned, clutching a paper that declared her ruination. The cowboy paused, then continued into the store. Helena forced herself to move, to walk away from the bank before she broke down entirely. Her feet carried her down Main Street, past the saloon where piano music tinkled cheerfully, past the hotel where she could not afford a room, past the restaurant where she had dined just last week with Richard, laughing and planning their future. She found herself at the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to scrubland and the Colorado River glinted in the distance. The September afternoon was warm, but she could see snow already dusting the peaks of the Book Cliffs to the north. Winter would come soon. What would she do when winter came? "Madam?" The voice behind her made her jump. She turned to find the cowboy from earlier, his hat in his hands, his expression concerned. Up close, she could see he was perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of weathered denim. "I don't mean to intrude, but are you all right?" Helena straightened her spine, summoning the dignity that had been bred into her since childhood. "I am perfectly well, thank you." "Forgive me for saying so, but you don't look perfectly well." His voice was gentle, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas or maybe Oklahoma. "You look like someone who just had her world cave in." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Helena felt her throat tighten, felt tears threatening, and she turned away quickly. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine." "My name is Kieran Porter," he said, not moving away. "I work at the Double Bar Ranch, about 5 miles west of here. Been in town picking up supplies." He hesitated. "I heard what happened at the bank." News travels fast when you're standing in line at the general store. Helena closed her eyes. Of course he had heard. Everyone had heard by now. "Then you understand why I would prefer to be alone." "I understand why you might think you want to be alone," Kieran said carefully. "But I have been broke and hungry before, madam, and I can tell you that being alone does not help much when you do not know where your next meal is coming from." Helena whirled on him, anger flashing hot in her chest. I do not need your pity, Mr. Porter. I am not offering pity, he said calmly. I am offering help. There is a difference. I do not need help from a stranger. Well, seeing as how I just introduced myself, I'm not a stranger anymore. He settled his hat back on his head. The double bar is run by Samuel and Martha Crawford. Good people. They are always looking for help, especially with winter coming. Martha could use someone in the house, cooking, cleaning, mending. It is not glamorous work, but it comes with room and board and fair wages. Helena stared at him. You're suggesting I become a servant? I am suggesting you take honest work that will keep you fed and sheltered. Kieran met her gaze steadily. Pride is a fine thing, Miss Zimmerman, but it does not keep you warm at night, and it does not fill your belly. She wanted to rage at him, to tell him he had no right to speak to her this way, but the words died in her throat because he was right. Pride was all she had left, and pride would not save her. I do not know how to cook or clean, she admitted finally, her voice small. I have never had to. Then you will learn. Kieran's expression softened. Martha is patient. She will teach you. And it is not forever, just until you figure out your next step. Helena looked down at her hands, at the kid gloves that had cost more than this man probably earned in a month. She thought of Richard, already on his way to Denver, already looking for his next wealthy bride. She thought of her father, who had loved her but had left her with nothing but debts and illusions. She thought of the empty house on the hill that was no longer hers. Why are you helping me? She asked quietly. Kieran was silent for a moment. Because someone helped me once when I had nothing. Figured I should pass it along. He gestured toward his horse. I am heading back to the ranch now. You are welcome to ride with me, talk to the Crawfords. If it does not work out, I will bring you back to town tomorrow. No harm done. It was a leap of faith, trusting a stranger, but Helena had no other options presenting themselves. She nodded slowly. All right. Thank you. Kieran smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look younger and less weathered. You can ride behind me. Gus here does not mind carrying double. He helped her mount the paint gelding, his hands respectful as he steadied her. Helena settled herself behind the saddle, acutely aware that she had never ridden like this before, never sat astride a horse with her skirts hiked up and her arms around a man's waist. But Kieran said nothing, just nudged Gus into an easy walk, and they left Palisade behind. The ride to the double bar took just under an hour. The September afternoon was cooling, the shadows growing long across the sage-dotted landscape. Kieran pointed out landmarks as they rode. The creek where the ranch cattle came to drink, the line of cottonwoods that marked the property boundary, the distant shape of the main house and barn. He talked easily, filling the silence with stories about the ranch and the Crawfords, clearly trying to put her at ease. Helena found herself relaxing despite her circumstances. There was something solid and dependable about Kieran Porter, something that made her feel safe even though her world had just collapsed. She let herself lean against his back slightly, feeling the warmth of him through his shirt, and for just a moment she allowed herself to stop thinking about tomorrow. The Double Bar Ranch was larger than she had expected, with a sprawling main house, a big barn, several corrals, and a bunkhouse for the hands. Kieran rode up to the main house and dismounted, then helped Helena down. Her legs were shaky from the ride, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Wait here," he said. "I will get Martha." He disappeared inside, and Helena stood in the yard, feeling suddenly exposed. 2 other cowboys were working near the barn, and they looked at her with open curiosity. She lifted her chin, refusing to show her fear or uncertainty. The front door opened, and a woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Martha Crawford was perhaps 50, with graying brown hair pulled back in a practical bun and kind eyes that assessed Helena in a single glance. "Miss Zimmerman," she said warmly, "Kieran tells me you might be looking for work." "Yes, madam." Helena's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Though I must be honest with you. I have no experience in domestic work. I am willing to learn, but I understand if that makes me unsuitable." Martha smiled. Honey, I would rather have someone willing to learn than someone who thinks they know everything. Come inside, let us talk. The interior of the Crawford house was warm and welcoming, smelling of fresh bread and coffee. Martha led Helena to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of coffee, then sat down at the scarred wooden table and gestured for Helena to do the same. Kieran had vanished, probably to tend to his horse and give them privacy. Kieran is a good judge of character, Martha said, wrapping her hands around her mug. He does not bring strays home often, so when he does, I pay attention. She studied Helena's face. You have had a hard day. It was such a gentle understatement that Helena almost laughed. You could say that. I heard about your father. I'm sorry. Bernard was a good man, even if he made some poor choices toward the end. You knew him? This is a small territory, honey. Everyone knows everyone, at least by reputation. Martha sipped her coffee. What I am offering is simple. You would help me run the household, cooking, cleaning, laundry, mending, preserving food for winter. We have 6 ranch hands, plus my husband and myself, so there is always work to be done. In exchange, you get your own room, 3 meals a day, and $20 a month. $20. It was less than Helena used to spend on gloves, but it was honest money, and it was more than she had now. When would I start? Tonight, if you want. I will show you to your room, you can get settled, and tomorrow we will begin. Martha's expression was kind but firm. I will not lie to you, Miss Zimmerman. The work is hard and the days are long. You will go to bed tired, your hands will roughen and your back will ache, but you will earn your keep and you will have a place here for as long as you need it. Helena thought of Richard, speeding toward Denver on the afternoon train. She thought of her father's grand house, now belonging to the bank. She thought of the life she had expected to live, the life that had been built on sand and wishful thinking. I will work hard, she said firmly. I promise you that. Martha reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Then welcome to the double bar, Helena. Let me show you your room. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the ranch yard. It was nothing like Helena's bedroom in town, which had been filled with velvet and silk and expensive furniture. But it was hers, at least for now, and that was more than she had expected to have by the end of this terrible day. Martha left her to settle in, promising that supper would be in an hour. Helena sat on the bed, still wearing her silk dress and kid gloves, and finally allowed herself to cry. She cried for her father, for the fortune that had never been as solid as she believed, for Richard's betrayal, for the life she had lost. She cried until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen, and then she washed her face in the basin, smoothed her hair, and went downstairs to face whatever came next. The dining room was filled with people when she entered. Samuel Crawford, a weathered man with a white beard and laugh lines around his eyes, sat at the head of the table. Martha bustled in from the kitchen carrying platters of food. The 6 ranch hands filled the other chairs, Kieran among them. They all looked up when Helena appeared in the doorway. Everyone, this is Helena Zimmerman, Martha announced. She will be helping me run the house. I expect you all to treat her with respect and courtesy. Her tone left no room for argument. The men murmured greetings, and Samuel stood to shake her hand. Welcome to the double bar, Miss Zimmerman. Any friend of Kieran's is welcome here. Helena glanced at Kieran, who gave her a slight nod of encouragement. She took the empty seat beside him, and Martha began passing the food. There was fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. It was simple, hearty food, nothing like the elaborate dinners Helena was used to, but it smelled wonderful, and she realized she had not eaten since breakfast. The conversation flowed easily around the table, the men talking about the day's work, plans for the coming week, the weather. Helena ate quietly, listening, learning. These were good people, she realized, honest, hard-working people who had probably never given a thought to the social intricacies that had consumed her life in Palisade. They accepted her presence without question, without judgment, and she felt something unknot in her chest. After supper, Kieran found her washing dishes in the kitchen while Martha put away the leftovers. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. "Better than I expected," Helena admitted, scrubbing a plate. At school, her hands, unused to this kind of work, were already red from the hot water. "Thank you for bringing me here." "You do not have to thank me." "Yes, I do." She looked at him directly. "You did not have to help me. Most people would have walked past and minded their own business." Kieran leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "My parents died when I was 16, he said quietly. "Cholera epidemic in Texas. I was left with nothing but a horse and the clothes on my back. A rancher named Tom Holloway took me in, taught me the cattle business, treated me like a son. He has been gone 5 years now, but I have never forgotten what he did for me." He met her eyes. "We all need help sometimes, Helena. There is no shame in that." It was the first time he had used her given name, and she found she liked the way it sounded in his Texas drawl. "Still, thank you." He smiled and pushed off the counter. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." He was right about that. Helena woke before dawn to the sound of Martha moving around in the kitchen below. She dressed quickly in one of her simpler dresses, though even her simplest dress was far too fine for housework, and hurried downstairs to find Martha already preparing breakfast for the men. "Good morning," Martha said cheerfully. "Ready to learn?" What followed was a crash course in running a ranch household. Martha showed her how to make biscuits from scratch, how to fry bacon without burning it, how to brew coffee strong enough to satisfy working men. Helena burned herself on the stove, dropped a bowl of eggs, and nearly set a dishcloth on fire, but Martha remained patient throughout, correcting her mistakes with gentle humor. The men filed in for breakfast at 6, hungry and ready for the day. Helena served them awkwardly, unused to waiting on others, but no one complained. Kieran caught her eye once and gave her an encouraging smile that warmed her more than it should have. After breakfast came the cleanup, and then Martha taught her how to make bread. "The secret is in the kneading," Martha explained, demonstrating the rhythmic push and fold. "You have to work the dough until it is smooth and elastic. Here, you try." Helena's first attempt produced bread that was dense and heavy, barely edible. But Martha just laughed and said, "Well, the chickens will appreciate it. You will do better tomorrow." The days developed a rhythm. Helena woke early, helped prepare meals, cleaned the house, did laundry in the big copper tub behind the house, mended clothes, and fell into bed exhausted every night. Her hands blistered and then calloused. Her back ached. Her expensive dresses became stained and worn, and Martha gave her some of her own older work dresses to wear instead, but something strange was happening. Despite the hard work, despite the aching muscles and ruined hands, Helena found herself oddly content. There was satisfaction in kneading bread and watching it rise, in hanging clean laundry in the Colorado sunshine, in serving a meal she had helped prepare and seeing the men eat with appreciation. She was learning to be useful, to be needed, and it filled something in her that had been empty even when she was wealthy. Kieran was often nearby, always ready with a word of encouragement or a hand when she struggled with something heavy. He taught her how to carry firewood properly, how to prime the pump when it stuck, how to shoo the chickens back into their coop at night. He never made her feel stupid for not knowing these things, never acted as though her previous life of privilege made her less than him. He treated her like an equal, and Helena found herself looking forward to his presence in a way that confused and frightened her. One evening in early October, after the supper dishes were done, Helena stepped outside for a breath of air. The night was clear and cold, the stars brilliant overhead. She wrapped her shawl tighter and walked toward the corral, where several horses dozed in the moonlight. "Could not sleep?" Kieran's voice came from the shadows near the barn. He emerged into the moonlight, a cigarette glowing in his hand. "Just needed some air," Helena said. "It is beautiful out here at night." He came to stand beside her at the corral fence. "That it is. I have slept under these stars more times than I can count. Never gets old." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Helena asked, "Do you ever regret it? This life? It must be hard, always working, never having much." Kieran considered the question. I have enough, he said finally. A good horse, honest work, friends I trust, a roof over my head most nights. That is more than a lot of people have. He glanced at her. Are you asking if I wish I had money? I suppose I am. Money is useful, Kieran said carefully, but it does not make you happy. I have known rich men who were miserable, and poor men who were content. It is not about what you have. It is about what you do with it, and who you share it with. Helena thought about Richard, who had loved her money more than he had ever loved her. She thought about her father, who had been so consumed with maintaining the illusion of wealth that he had forgotten what actually mattered. My fiancé left me the day I lost my fortune, she said quietly. He did not even say goodbye properly, just left. Then he was a fool, Kieran said flatly. Maybe he was just practical. What use is a poor wife? Kieran turned to face her fully. A real man does not measure a woman's worth by her bank account, Helena. He was not practical. He was shallow, and you are better off without him. The conviction in his voice made her throat tight. How can you be so sure? Because I have gotten to know you this past month. You work hard. You do not complain. You learn fast, and you treat people with kindness even when you're exhausted. Those are the things that matter. Not how much money your father had or what kind of house you used to live in. He stubbed out his cigarette. Any man who cannot see that is not worthy of you. Helena felt heat rise to her cheeks, and she was grateful for the darkness that hid her expression. That is very kind of you to say. I am not being kind. I am being honest. Kieran's voice softened. You are worth more than you think, Helena Zimmerman. Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and walked toward the bunkhouse, leaving her alone with the stars and a feeling in her chest that she could not quite name. October gave way to November, and the first snows dusted the Book Cliffs. The men brought the cattle down from the higher pastures, and the ranch settled into the quieter rhythm of winter. Helena had been at the Double Bar for 2 months now, and she barely recognized herself. Her hands were rough and capable. Her arms had grown stronger from carrying water and firewood. Her face had lost its pampered softness, weathered by sun and wind. She could make bread that actually rose, fry chicken without burning it, and get stains out of laundry that Martha swore were impossible. But more than that, she had found a place where she belonged. Martha had become like a mother to her, patient and kind. Samuel treated her like a daughter, always ready with a terrible joke or a word of praise. The other ranch hands, initially wary of the rich girl from town, had accepted her as one of their own. And Kieran. Kieran had become something she could not quite define. More than a friend, but not quite a suitor. He sought her out in the evenings, and they would talk while she did mending or he cleaned his tack. He told her stories of his travels, of the ranches he had worked, of the country he had seen. She told him about her childhood, about her father, about the life she had thought she wanted. They laughed together, worked together, and Helena found herself watching for him during the day, her heart lifting when she caught sight of him in the corral or riding in from the range. She tried to tell herself it meant nothing. He was just being kind, just being a friend. But the way he looked at her sometimes with something warm and wondering in his eyes made her heart race in a way Richard never had. The first real snowstorm hit in late November, 3 days before Thanksgiving. Helena woke to find the world transformed, white and pristine and bitterly cold. The men struggled to get the animals fed and watered, and Martha kept the fire roaring and hot coffee always ready. It was late afternoon when Kieran stumbled into the kitchen, stamping snow from his boots. His face was red with cold, his coat crusted with ice. We got all the stock secure, he reported to Martha, but it is coming down hard out there. I do not think we will be going anywhere for a few days. Martha nodded. I was afraid of that. Well, we have plenty of food and the woodshed is full. We will be fine. Kieran's eyes found Helena, who was rolling out pie crust at the kitchen table. You doing all right? Warm and dry, she said with a smile. Better than you look. He laughed. I will be fine once I thaw out. But she noticed he was shivering, and his lips had a faint blue tinge. "Sit down," she ordered, abandoning the pie crust. She poured him a cup of coffee and pressed it into his hands, then ladled a bowl of the stew that had been simmering on the stove all day. "Drink that, eat this. You will catch your death." Kieran obeyed, too cold to argue. Helena watched him eat, worry gnawing at her. He had been outside for hours in that blizzard, making sure the animals were safe. He could have frozen to death, and the thought made her chest tight with fear. When he finished eating, she said firmly, "You need to change into dry clothes and warm up by the fire." "Yes, madam," he said, a smile tugging at his lips despite his shivers. "You're getting bossy, Miss Zimmerman." "Someone has to look after you," she retorted, and then flushed when she realized how that sounded. Kieran's expression softened. "I am glad it is you," he said quietly, and then he was gone, heading to the bunkhouse to change. The storm lasted 3 days. The men could not work, so they gathered in the main house, playing cards and telling stories while Martha and Helena cooked and baked. It should have been stressful, being cooped up with 8 people in close quarters, but Helena found she enjoyed it. There was a warm camaraderie to it, a sense of pulling together against the elements. Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and cold. The snow piled high against the buildings. Martha and Helena spent the morning preparing a feast: roast turkey, mashed potatoes, gravy, green beans, cranberry sauce, fresh rolls, and 3 kinds of pie. The dining room table was crowded and noisy, and Samuel said grace with a catch in his voice, thanking God for the food, for the ranch, for the people gathered around the table. Helena looked around at the faces illuminated by lamplight and felt her own throat tighten. A year ago, she had been planning a Thanksgiving dinner for Palisades elite, worrying about the silver and the menu and who would sit where. This meal, eaten on mismatched plates with calloused working men, was infinitely better. After dinner, Samuel pulled out his fiddle, and someone pushed back the furniture for dancing. Helena had never danced like this before, rough and energetic, everyone laughing and stomping and whirling around the room. Kieran caught her hand and spun her into the dance, and she laughed breathlessly, dizzy with the motion and the music and the feel of his hands on her waist. When the song ended, they were both breathing hard, grinning at each other like children. The next song was slower, and Kieran pulled her close without asking, one hand on her back, the other holding hers. Helena rested her head against his shoulder and let him guide her through the simple steps, aware of every point where their bodies touched, every breath he took. "Helena," he murmured against her hair, and there was something in his voice that made her pull back to look at him. The music and laughter faded around them. All she could see was his face, his eyes dark and serious and full of something that made her heart pound. "Yes? I need to tell you something," he began. But before he could continue, Samuel called for another lively tune, and the moment shattered. Kieran stepped back, releasing her, and the spell was broken. But Helena could not stop thinking about the way he had looked at her, the way he had said her name. That night, lying in her narrow bed, she admitted to herself what she had been denying for weeks. She was falling in love with Kieran Porter. Maybe she had been falling in love with him since that first day, when he had found her on the edge of town and offered her hope when she had none. It terrified her. She had thought she loved Richard, but that had been shallow and based on expectations and suitability. What she felt for Kieran was different, deeper, like bedrock beneath sand. He had seen her at her lowest, had watched her struggle and fail and learn, and he valued her anyway. Not for her money or her name or her connections, but for herself. But what did he feel? He was kind to her, sought her company, but he was kind to everyone. Maybe she was reading too much into it, seeing what she wanted to see. December brought more snow and bitter cold. The ranch work slowed to the essential tasks, feeding animals, breaking ice in water troughs, keeping fires going. Helena and Martha spent long hours in the warm kitchen, baking and preserving and mending. One afternoon, Martha sent Helena to the root cellar for potatoes. Helena took a lantern and made her way across the snowy yard, her breath fogging in the frigid air. The root cellar was dug into the hillside behind the house, cool and dark and smelling of earth. She was filling her basket when she heard the door open above her. "Helena!" Kieran's voice echoed down the stairs. "Down here," she called back. He descended the steps carefully, ducking his head beneath the low ceiling. "Martha said you might need help carrying things." "I can manage a basket of potatoes," she said, amused. "I know you can, but that does not mean you have to." He took the basket from her hands. "You've been working hard lately. So have you." She studied his face in the lamplight. He looked tired, lines of exhaustion around his eyes. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," he said automatically, then sighed. "Just tired. Winter is always hard." Helena made a decision. "Kieran, what were you going to tell me on Thanksgiving when we were dancing?" He set down the basket carefully. "You remember that?" "Of course I remember. You looked so serious." Kieran was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low and careful. "I was going to tell you that I'm in love with you." Helena's breath caught. "What?" "I know I have no right," he continued, not meeting her eyes. "You are a lady, and I am just a ranch hand. You came from money and education, and I barely finished school before my parents died. But I cannot help how I feel, Helena. I have tried to fight it. Tried to tell myself it is impossible, but it does not change the truth." He finally looked at her, and his eyes were blazing with emotion. "I fell in love with you that first day, when you stood on the edge of town with your whole world crashing down and still kept your head high. I fell more in love with you when you came here and worked until your hands bled, learning things you never had to learn before. I love your stubbornness and your pride and your kindness and your laugh. I love everything about you, and I do not care that you have no money. I never cared about that." Helena could not breathe, could not think. "Kieran, You do not have to say anything," he interrupted, stepping back. "I just needed you to know I could not keep pretending anymore. If it makes things awkward, I will leave. I will find work somewhere else. I do not want to make your life harder." "Leave?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "You think I want you to leave?" "I do not know what you want," he said helplessly. Helena closed the distance between them and took his face in her rough, work-worn hands. "I want you to kiss me, you foolish man." For a heartbeat, Kieran just stared at her. Then his arms came around her waist and he kissed her with a desperate tenderness that made her knees weak. Helena wound her arms around his neck and kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it. Her love, her gratitude, her hope for the future. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. "Helena Zimmerman, are you sure about this?" "I have never been more sure of anything." She smiled up at him. "I love you, Kieran. Not because you helped me, though you did. Not because I am grateful, though I am. I love you because you are good and honest and kind. Because you see me, really see me, in a way no one else ever has. Because when I am with you, I feel like I have come home." Kieran kissed her again, softer this time, reverent. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this," he promised. They stood in the root cellar for a long time, just holding each other, until Martha's voice calling from the house finally made them break apart, laughing like conspirators. That evening, they told Martha and Samuel. Martha cried and hugged them both, declaring she had known all along. Samuel shook Kieran's hand solemnly and welcomed him to the family, which made Helena's heart swell because she realized that was exactly what the Crawfords had become, her family. The other ranch hands took the news with good-natured teasing and congratulations. That night, Kieran sat beside Helena at supper, their hands linked beneath the table, and Helena thought about how far she had come from that terrible day in September. She had lost a fortune and a fiancé who did not truly love her, but she had gained something infinitely more valuable, a life built on honest work, real friends, and a love that had nothing to do with money or status. Christmas came soft and white, and Kieran gave Helena a simply carved wooden box he had made himself. Inside was a ring fashioned from a bent silver spoon, crude but beautiful in its simplicity. "I will get you a proper ring someday," he promised, slipping it onto her finger, "when I have saved enough." "It is perfect," Helena said, meaning it. She had worn diamonds and emeralds when she was wealthy, but this simple ring meant more than all of them combined. They were married in Palisade on a cold January morning in 1884 in a simple ceremony at the church. Martha stood as Helena's matron of honor, and Samuel stood up with Kieran. The pews were filled with ranch hands and townspeople who had watched Helena transform from a pampered heiress to a capable ranch wife. She wore a simple dress Martha had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers that Kieran had somehow found in the winter landscape. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, Kieran kissed her with a joy that made everyone in the church smile. They walked out into the January sunshine as Mr. and Mrs. Kieran Porter, and Helena had never been happier in her life. They could not afford a honeymoon, so they went straight back to the double bar. Samuel and Martha had given them the small foreman's cabin near the main house, which Helena and Kieran had spent weeks fixing up. It was tiny, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it was theirs. That first night, sitting before the fire in their own home, Kieran pulled Helena into his lap and kissed her thoroughly. "Mrs. Porter," he murmured against her lips, "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Helena said, running her fingers through his hair. "So do I." Their life together found its rhythm quickly. Kieran worked the ranch, often gone from dawn to dusk. Helena continued helping Martha with the main house while also caring for their cabin. It was a simple life, and a hard one, but Helena embraced it wholeheartedly. She learned to make soap and candles, to preserve vegetables, to knit socks and mend shirts. Her hands, once soft and pampered, became strong and capable, but the best part was the evenings, when Kieran came home and they had their small cabin to themselves. They talked about their days, their dreams, their future. Kieran wanted to save enough to buy their own small ranch someday. Helena wanted that too, but she was content with what they had now. They had each other, and that was enough. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and bringing the first wildflowers. The ranch exploded with activity as calves were born and horses were trained and fences were mended. Helena helped with the garden, planting vegetables that would feed the household through the next winter. She had never imagined finding satisfaction in such simple tasks, but there was deep contentment in watching things grow under her care. In late April, Helena realized she had not had her monthly courses in some time. At first, she thought it was just the hard work and changing seasons, but when Martha found her retching behind the chicken coop one morning, the older woman took one look at her face and smiled knowingly. "How far along do you think you are?" Martha asked gently. Helena did the calculations and felt her heart leap. 3 months, maybe? I did not realize until now. First babies are sneaky like that sometimes. Martha hugged her. "Have you told Kieran?" "Not yet. I wanted to be sure." That evening, Helena prepared Kieran's favorite meal: fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and apple pie. He came home tired and dusty from a long day moving cattle, but he brightened when he saw the food. "What is the occasion?" he asked, kissing her cheek. "Sit down and eat first," Helena said, suddenly nervous. They ate, making small talk about their days, but Helena could barely taste the food. Finally, when Kieran was finishing his pie, she took a deep breath and said, "I have something to tell you." He looked up, immediately attentive. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine, better than fine." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Kieran went very still. His eyes moved from her face to where his hand rested against her stomach, then back to her face. "A baby?" His voice cracked slightly. "We are having a baby? In October, I think." Kieran stood abruptly, pulling her into his arms and holding her so tight she could barely breathe. When he pulled back, she saw tears on his cheeks. "Helena, His voice broke. You have made me the happiest man alive." They held each other as the sun set beyond their small cabin windows, already imagining the child who would join them. Kieran talked excitedly about teaching their son or daughter to ride, about building a cradle, about all the things they would do together as a family. Helena listened and smiled and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was nothing like the life she had imagined as Bernard Zimmerman's wealthy daughter. It was infinitely better. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Helena continued working, though Martha and Kieran both insisted she not overdo it. Her body changed, swelling with new life, and Kieran looked at her with such wonder and love that it brought tears to her eyes. He talked to her belly every night, telling their unborn child stories and promises. Summer passed in a blur of heat and work. The garden flourished, and Helena spent long days preserving food for winter. The other ranch wives in the area, women she had once considered beneath her social notice, came to visit and share advice about childbirth and babies. She found friendship and camaraderie among them and realized how much she had missed by staying in her wealthy bubble. One hot August afternoon, a carriage arrived at the double bar. Helena was hanging laundry, her pregnant belly making the task awkward, when she heard the horses. She looked up and felt her heart stop. Richard stepped out of the carriage, dressed as impeccably as always, looking exactly as he had the day he left her. He saw Helena and froze, his eyes widening as he took in her work dress, her pregnant belly, her rough hands gripping wet laundry. "Helena?" He sounded genuinely shocked. "Is that really you?" Helena set down the laundry and faced him with her head high. "Richard, what brings you to the double bar?" He approached cautiously as though she might bolt. "I've been looking for you. I went to Palisade and someone said you were working here." His eyes kept dropping to her stomach. "You are married?" "I am." "To whom?" There was an edge to his voice now. Before Helena could answer, Kieran appeared from the barn, alerted by the sound of the carriage. He took in the scene at a glance and strode over, positioning himself protectively beside Helena. "Can I help you with something?" His voice was polite but cold. Richard looked between them, and understanding dawned on his face. "You married a ranch hand?" He said it with such disdain that Helena felt Kieran tense beside her. "I married the man I love," Helena said clearly. "Why are you here, Richard?" Richard gathered himself, assuming the charming expression she had once found attractive. "I made a mistake, Helena. I should not have left you. I have regretted it every day since." "Have you?" Her voice was flat. "Yes. I have come to ask you to come back. I have had time to think, and I realize that money is not everything. We can start over. I have a good position in Denver now, and we could—" "No." The word came out hard and final. Richard blinked. "What?" "I said no, Richard. I do not want to start over with you. I have a life here, a good life with a man who loves me for who I am, not for my father's money." Helena felt Kieran's hand settle on her back, warm and supportive. "You left me when I had nothing. You did not even look back. And now you return because you have decided money is not everything? Where was that realization when I needed you?" "I made a mistake," Richard said, his charm fraying. "Surely you can forgive that." "I do forgive you," Helena said quietly, "but I do not want you. I love my husband. I love the life we have built together. I am happier now than I ever was when I had my father's fortune. So please go back to Denver and forget about me." Richard looked at her pregnant belly again, at her work-roughened hands, at the simple cabin behind her. "You would rather have this poverty, this drudgery?" "It is not poverty," Kieran said, his voice dangerously quiet. "It is an honest life, and Helena is loved and valued here, which is clearly more than you ever gave her." "I am talking to Helena, not you," Richard snapped. "And I am done talking to you," Helena said firmly. "Goodbye, Richard. I wish you well, but please do not come back." Richard stared at her for a long moment as though waiting for her to change her mind. When she did not, he shook his head in disgust. "You have truly lost your mind, Helena. When you tire of playing house with your cowboy, do not come crying to me." He climbed back into his carriage and drove away without another word. Helena watched him go, feeling nothing but relief. When the carriage disappeared down the road, she turned to find Kieran watching her with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm perfect," she said, and meant it. She went up on tiptoes to kiss him. "Thank you for being here." "Always," he promised. That night, lying in bed with Kieran's hand on her swollen belly, Helena thought about the woman she had been a year ago, that Helena would never have believed she could be happy without wealth and status, but that Helena had not known what real love felt like. She had not known the satisfaction of honest work or the warmth of true friendship. She had lived in a beautiful cage, never understanding that she was not free. Now she was free. Poor in money, perhaps, but rich in everything that mattered. October came with crisp mornings and brilliant aspens turning the hillsides gold. Helena's belly was huge now, and she moved carefully, her back aching and her ankles swollen. Martha had assured her this was normal, that the baby would come when it was ready. On October 15th, a cool Tuesday morning, Helena's water broke while she was making breakfast. Kieran had already left for the day, riding the fence line on the far pasture. Martha sent one of the ranch hands to find him while she helped Helena back to the cabin and into bed. "It is going to be fine," Martha soothed, even as Helena gripped her hand through a contraction. "You are strong, and this baby wants to meet you." The labor lasted all day. Kieran came racing back and stayed by Helena's side, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement. The pain was worse than anything Helena had imagined, wave after wave that threatened to drown her. But Kieran never left, and Martha coached her through each contraction with calm confidence. As the sun was setting, painting the cabin walls gold and orange, Martha said, "All right, Helena, the baby is coming. One more big push." Helena bore down with everything she had, and suddenly there was a release, a moment of silence, and then a baby's lusty cry filled the cabin. Helena collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaming down her face. "It is a boy," Martha announced, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket. "A beautiful, healthy boy." She placed the baby in Helena's arms, and Helena looked down at her son in wonder. He had a shock of dark hair and was screaming with impressive lung power. As she held him close, he quieted, his tiny fist curling around her finger. Kieran was crying openly, his hand gentle on his son's head. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Helena, he is perfect." They named him Samuel Kieran Porter, after the man who had given them a home and a chance. Little Samuel, or Sam as they quickly began calling him, was a healthy, robust baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. Kieran was besotted from the first moment, and Helena often found him just standing over the cradle watching Sam sleep with an expression of wonder on his face. The winter of 1884 was harsh, but the little cabin stayed warm. Helena learned to care for a baby while still managing the household, and though she was often exhausted, she had never been happier. Kieran helped whenever he could, walking Sam in the middle of the night when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, singing off-key lullabies that made Helena laugh. Spring came again, and Sam grew from a tiny infant into a chubby, smiling baby who laughed when Kieran tickled him and cooed at his mother's voice. The whole ranch was enchanted with him, and the usually gruff cowboys became soft and silly in his presence. One evening in May, Kieran came home with an unusual expression on his face. Helena was nursing Sam, and she looked up curiously. "What is it?" "Samuel Crawford wants to talk to us here," Kieran said, "both of us. Can you come to the main house when Sam is done eating?" Curious and a little worried, Helena finished nursing Sam and carried him to the main house. Martha took the baby with a smile, and Helena and Kieran went into Samuel's study, where the older man sat behind his desk. "Sit down, both of you," Samuel said, gesturing to the chairs across from him. When they were seated, he leaned back and studied them for a long moment. "You have both been with me for over 2 years now. Helena, you came here with nothing, and proved yourself to be one of the hardest workers I have ever seen. Kieran, you have been with me longer, and I trust you completely. You are both family to Martha and me." Helena felt Kieran's hand find hers, squeezing gently. "I am not getting any younger," Samuel continued. "Martha and I have been talking, and we have decided it is time to start thinking about the future of this ranch. We have no children of our own, as you know. When we are gone, the double bar will need someone to run it." He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder of papers. "I am making you both partners in the ranch. 20% ownership now, with the agreement that when Martha and I pass on, the ranch becomes yours entirely. Kieran, you will be the foreman officially, with a foreman's salary. Helena, you will continue managing the household, also with proper wages, and you will move into the foreman's house, which is bigger than that cabin and more suitable for a growing family." Helena and Kieran sat in stunned silence. Finally, Kieran found his voice. "Samuel, I do not know what to say. This is too much." "It is not too much. It is what you have earned." Samuel's expression was kind. "You have both worked hard for this ranch, and you care about it the way Martha and I do. We want to know it will be in good hands when we are gone. Will you accept?" Helena looked at Kieran, saw her own shock and gratitude reflected in his eyes. They had come here with nothing. Now they were being offered a partnership, a real stake in something lasting. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, we accept. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you both so much." Martha appeared in the doorway, smiling through tears. "I told you they would say yes," she said to her husband. Then she came and hugged them both. "Welcome to the partnership. Now let us celebrate." They moved into the foreman's house in June, a sturdy 2-story building with 3 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and a porch that wrapped around 2 sides. It felt impossibly grand after their tiny cabin. Helena set up their bedroom and a nursery for Sam, and there was still a guest room left over. They bought simple furniture with their savings, and Helena made curtains and rugs to make it feel like home. Kieran threw himself into his new responsibilities as foreman, and Helena could see how much he thrived with the additional authority and trust. He was a natural leader, and the other ranch hands respected him. The ranch prospered under his management, and Samuel often said he wished he had made Kieran foreman years ago. Helena continued managing the household, but now she had help. Samuel hired a young woman from town to assist with the daily chores, which gave Helena more time with Sam. She taught the girl, a shy 18-year-old named Anne, the same way Martha had taught her, with patience and kindness. It felt good to pass along what she had learned. Life settled into a happy routine. Sam grew from a baby into a toddler, learning to walk and talk and get into everything. Kieran adored him, teaching him about horses and cattle as soon as he was old enough to understand. Helena often found them in the barn together. Sam perched on Kieran's shoulders, both of them talking seriously about whatever they were doing. In the spring of 1887, Helena discovered she was pregnant again. Sam was 2.5, and she had been hoping for another baby. Kieran was delighted, and Sam, who did not fully understand, was excited about the prospect of a playmate. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Helena knew what to expect. She continued her work until the last few weeks, and when the baby came in November, the birth was faster and less frightening. This time, it was a girl with red gold hair and green eyes. They named her Rose Martha Porter, and Martha Crawford cried when she heard. Little Rose was calmer than Sam had been, a peaceful baby who rarely fussed. Sam was initially disappointed that she could not play with him immediately, but he quickly became protective of his little sister, bringing her toys and patting her head gently. The years passed in a blur of seasons and work and family. Samuel Crawford passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1890, and they all mourned him deeply. But the ranch continued under Kieran's capable management, and Martha stayed on in the main house, helping with the children and the household. Sam grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved the ranch and the animals. Rose was more adventurous, always getting into mischief and making everyone laugh. In 1891, Helena had another son, whom they named James, and in 1894, another daughter they called Lily. The foreman's house rang with children's laughter and the noise of a growing family. Helena sometimes looked around her life and marveled at how different it was from anything she had imagined. She was 35 years old, mother of 4, partner in a successful ranch, married to a man who loved her more with each passing year. Her hands were permanently calloused, her face was lined from sun and laughter, and she had not worn silk or jewels in over a decade. She had never been happier. One evening in the fall of 1895, after the children were in bed, Helena and Kieran sat on their porch watching the sunset. They did this often, these quiet moments together at the end of long days. Kieran's arm was around her shoulders, and Helena leaned against him contentedly. "Do you ever miss it?" Kieran asked quietly. "The life you had before?" Helena considered the question. "Sometimes I miss my father," she admitted. "But the life itself? No. I was living in a gilded cage, Kieran. I did not know who I was or what I was capable of. I thought wealth and status were what mattered." She turned to look at him. "You taught me what really matters: love, family, honest work, a place where you belong. I would not trade what we have for all the money in the world." Kieran kissed her forehead. "I fell in love with you when you had nothing," he said, "and I have loved watching you build this life with me. You are the strongest, most capable, most beautiful woman I have ever known, Helena Porter." "Even with 4 children and perpetually dirty fingernails?" she teased. "Especially then." He grinned. "Though I will admit I'm rather fond of those dirty fingernails. They mean you are not afraid of hard work." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. Helena thought about that terrible day in September 1883, when her world had collapsed. She had thought her life was over. Instead, it had been a beginning. Richard's betrayal had been a blessing, freeing her from a shallow life and a man who valued money over love. Her father's financial ruin had forced her to discover her own strength. And Kieran, her wonderful Kieran, had loved her when she had nothing, had seen her value when she could not see it herself, had stood beside her through hard work and harder times, building a life and a family that was richer than any fortune. Martha passed away in her sleep in 1897, and the ranch became fully theirs as Samuel had intended. It was bittersweet, losing the woman who had been like a mother to Helena, but Martha died peacefully, surrounded by the family she had chosen. The ranch continued to thrive under Kieran's management, and they added more land and cattle over the years. Sam, now 15, was already as good a cowboy as any of the hired hands. Rose, at 12, could ride better than most men and had no patience for traditional ladies' activities. James, at 6, was fascinated by everything and asked endless questions about how things worked. Lily, at 3, was everyone's darling, charming the ranch hands with her gap-toothed smile. Helena stood in her kitchen one morning in the spring of 1898, preparing breakfast for her family, and reflected on the 15 years that had passed since that terrible, wonderful day when her fortune disappeared. She was 42 years old, her hair was going gray, her body bore the marks of hard work and childbearing. She was exactly where she wanted to be. Kieran came in from the morning chores and wrapped his arms around her from behind, kissing her neck. "Good morning, Mrs. Porter." "Good morning," she said, leaning back against him. "How are the new calves?" "Thriving. Sam is watching them now. That boy has a real gift with cattle." "He learned from the best," Helena said, turning in his arms to kiss him properly. "Mama, that is disgusting." Rose's voice came from the doorway, but she was grinning. "We can see you." "Good," Kieran said, not releasing Helena. "You should know what a proper marriage looks like." Rose rolled her eyes but came to hug them both. "When is breakfast? I am starving." The morning unfolded like hundreds of mornings before it. The family gathered around the table, children talking over each other, plans being made for the day, laughter and love filling every corner. After breakfast, Kieran went out to work with Sam. Rose went to help with the horses, and Helena settled down to teach James and Lily their lessons at the kitchen table. This was her life now. Not the life she had been born to, but the life she had built with her own hands and heart. A life earned, not inherited. A life shared with a man who loved her for who she was, not what she had. A life filled with children and work and laughter and love. That evening after the children were in bed, Helena and Kieran walked out to the hill behind the house where they had buried Samuel and Martha Crawford. The sun was setting, painting the Colorado sky in shades of orange and purple. They stood together, hands linked, looking out over the ranch that had become their home. "Do you remember the day we met?" Helena asked. "Every detail," Kieran said. "You were standing at the edge of town, looking lost and fierce at the same time. I knew I had to help you, though I did not know why. I just knew." "You saved me," Helena said quietly. "No." Kieran shook his head. "You saved yourself, Helena. I just gave you a place to land. Everything else you did on your own." "We did it together," Helena corrected. She looked up at him. This man who had loved her when she had nothing, who had stood by her through every hardship, who had built a life with her that was more precious than gold. "I love you, Kieran Porter. More now than the day we married." "And I love you," Sini said, pulling her close. "My fortune, my home, my heart." They stood together as the stars emerged. Two people who had found each other at the worst possible moment and turned it into the best possible life. The ranch spread out below them. Their children slept safely in their beds, and the future stretched ahead full of possibility. Helena Zimmerman had lost everything 15 years ago: her father, her fortune, her expected future. But in losing everything, she had found what truly mattered. She had found honest work and real friendship. She had found her own strength and capability, and most importantly, she had found a man who loved her not for her money or her name, but for herself. Richard had left when her fortune disappeared. Kieran had loved her with nothing in her name. And in the end, that had made all the difference. Years continued to pass in the way they do on a working ranch, marked by seasons and births and hard work and small joys. Sam grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over more and more of the ranch management as Kieran's hair turned gray. In 1902, at 19, Sam married a rancher's daughter from Junction, a practical girl named Elizabeth who fit into the family as though she had always been there. They built a small house on the east edge of the property, and by 1904, they had given Helena and Kieran their first grandchild, a boy they named Kieran after his grandfather. Rose, true to her nature, did not marry until she was 23, and even then only because she met a man as independent and strong-willed as herself. Daniel was a horse trainer from Wyoming, and he and Rose made their living breeding and training horses on a section of the ranch Kieran deeded to them as a wedding present. James went to college in Denver studying engineering, but he came home every summer and eventually returned permanently, using his education to improve the ranch's operations. He never married. Content with his books and his inventions, but he was a beloved uncle to all the children that followed. Lily, the baby of the family, grew into a beautiful young woman who shocked everyone by becoming a teacher in Palisade. She married the town doctor in 1909, and they lived in town, but she visited the ranch often, bringing her own children to run wild on the land where she had grown up. Through it all, Helena and Kieran remained the steady center of their growing family. They grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. The ranch prospered, expanding until it was one of the most successful operations in the region, but success never changed them. They remained the same people they had always been: hardworking, honest, devoted to each other and to the life they had built. In 1910, on a warm September afternoon, Helena and Kieran celebrated their 26th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a big party, and Helena looked around at all the faces: Sam and Elizabeth with their 3 children, Rose and Daniel with their 2, Lily and her husband with their baby daughter, James with his quiet smile. Martha and Samuel Crawford would have been proud. That evening, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Helena and Kieran sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Helena was 54 now, her hair completely gray, her hands gnarled from decades of work. Kieran was 51, his face weathered, his body still strong despite the years of hard labor. 26 years, Helena mused. It seems like yesterday and forever at the same time. Best 26 years of my life, or Kieran said, his hand finding hers automatically. Mine too. Helena squeezed his hand. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? If Richard had not left, if you had not found me that day, if the Crawfords had not given me a chance? Sometimes, Kieran admitted, but then I remember that everything happened exactly as it was supposed to. We found each other, Helena. That is what matters. Helena leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. You know what I realized today, watching all our children and grandchildren? What is that? That we built something lasting. Not just the ranch, but a family. A legacy of love and hard work and loyalty that matters more than all the money my father ever made. Kieran pressed a kiss to her hair. Bernard Zimmerman's daughter, he murmured. Who would have thought she would become the best ranch wife in Colorado? Helena laughed. Not me. That is for certain. I could not even make bread without burning it when I first came here. You learned fast. I had good teachers and motivation. She looked up at him. I wanted to be worthy of you. You were always worthy of me, Helena, from that very first day. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set and the stars emerged, just as they had done for over a quarter century. The ranch was quiet around them, the cattle settled for the night, the horses dozing in the barn, their family safe and happy in their own homes. This was not the life Helena Zimmerman had been born to. It was not the life she had expected or planned, but it was the life she had chosen, the life she had built with determination and love, and the help of a good man who saw her value when she could not see it herself. Her fortune had disappeared all those years ago, taking with it a man who loved only her money. But in its place, she had found something infinitely more precious, a man who loved her with nothing in her name, and a life richer than any amount of gold could buy. And as Helena Porter sat on her porch in the gathering darkness, her husband's hand warm in hers, her family thriving around her, and her future secure, she knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single thing. She was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly who she was meant to be with, living exactly the life she was meant to live. The fortune had disappeared, but love had remained. And in the end, that was the only fortune that truly mattered.